My twin sister turned me into a patient at the hospital where I worked. She forged my medical chart, altered my lab results, and created a fake diagnosis so severe that I lost my job, my autonomy, and nearly my sanity. All so she could keep playing the role of the fragile, saintly caregiver. All so she could remain the center of attention. The worst part? Our mother, a head surgical nurse, believed every single lie, until the day a nurse found a small folded note hidden in Vivian's shoe. A note with my false lab values written in her handwriting. My name is Eleanor Ridge. I'm a twin. Or rather, I'm the other twin. The one born 3 minutes later, the one who never needed saving, the one who could be forgotten because I was healthy, functional, and whole. Vivian and I share the same DNA, the same face, the same birthday. But from the moment we took our first breath, we were treated as opposites. She was delicate, special, worthy of protection. I was strong, capable, and therefore disposable. What I'm about to tell you is how I went from being invisible to reclaiming my own identity. How my family discovered that the daughter they ignored was the one who survived. And how the truth came out not through a dramatic confession, but through a tiny piece of paper that fell from a shoe. But before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever been the one expected to be strong while someone else got all the care? If you've ever felt like you had to prove your worth just to be seen, hit that like button now. Subscribe to this channel, because this story you'll never forget, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know this message is reaching people who understand. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I remember the exact moment I realized I was the disposable twin. I was 8 years old, sitting in our pediatrician's office in Rochester, Minnesota. Vivian had a mild cold, nothing serious, but she sat in our mother's lap with her head on Mom's shoulder, getting her hair stroked, her forehead kissed. I had the same cold, same symptoms, same virus. But I sat alone on the plastic chair, swinging my legs, watching them. The doctor looked at both of us and said we'd be fine in a few days. But on the way home, Mom stopped at the pharmacy to pick up a prescription for Vivian, a special humidifier, organic throat lozenges. When I asked if I'd get one too, Mom smiled that patient smile and said, "You're tougher, Eleanor. You don't need all that." I was 8. I didn't understand that being tough meant being neglected. Our names should have been the first clue. Vivian. Beautiful, elegant, almost musical. It means alive, full of life. Our father Henry chose it before we were even born, the moment he saw the first ultrasound. My name, Eleanor, came second. It's a fine name, don't get me wrong, but it was chosen in the delivery room, almost as an afterthought. Mom later told me she was too exhausted to be creative after naming Vivian. Even our rooms reflected the difference. When we turned 6, Dad painted Vivian's room a soft lavender with white trim. He hung fairy lights and put up shelves for her collection of porcelain dolls. My room stayed the same pale beige it had always been. When I asked Dad why, he said, "You've never complained about your room, sweetheart. I thought you liked it simple." I did like it simple, but I would have liked to be asked. Our birthdays were always a study in contrast. On our 9th birthday, Vivian got a custom cake shaped like a castle, pink and purple with edible glitter. Mine was a regular sheet cake from the grocery store with "Happy Birthday, Eleanor" written in blue icing. At our 10th, she got a new bike with streamers and a bell. I got her old bike, repainted. "You're so responsible, Eleanor," Mom said. "You'll take better care of it anyway." The thing about being the strong twin is that people start to believe you don't feel pain. When we were 11, we both auditioned for the school play. Vivian got the lead role, even though I sang better. The drama teacher pulled me aside and said, "You have a beautiful voice, Eleanor, but Vivian just has that fragile quality the character needs. You understand, right?" I nodded. I always understood. Understanding was my job. Dad was different. He saw me, really saw me. He was a high school history teacher, quiet and thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. On the nights when Mom fussed over Vivian's imagined ailments, Dad would sit with me in my plain beige room and we'd talk about everything. Civil rights, world wars, the power of truth. He taught me that being loud doesn't make you right, and being quiet doesn't make you wrong. When I was 12, I told him I felt invisible. We were sitting on my bed, and I just blurted it out. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't tell me I was being dramatic. He held my hand and said, "Eleanor, someday people will see what I see. And when they do, they won't be able to look away." I held on to those words like a lifeline. But then, when we were 15, Dad died. Heart attack, no warning. One moment he was grading papers at the kitchen table. The next moment he was gone. And with him went the only person who made me feel like I mattered just by existing. After that, Mom poured everything into Vivian. Every bit of hope, pride, and attention. It was like she decided that if she couldn't save Dad, she'd save our fragile sister instead. Vivian learned quickly that being sick, being delicate, being vulnerable got her what she needed. Love, proximity, power, and me. I learned that being healthy meant being alone. High school was when Vivian's performance reached new heights. She developed mysterious symptoms that required special accommodations. Chronic fatigue that meant she could skip gym class. Sensitivity to fluorescent lights that got her a note to leave class whenever she wanted. Digestive issues that required a specialized meal plan that Mom prepared every morning while I made my own toast. I'm not saying she faked everything. I'm saying she amplified everything. A headache became a migraine. Tiredness became chronic fatigue syndrome. A stomachache became a potential gluten intolerance that was never actually diagnosed, but was treated as gospel truth. The school nurse knew our family well. Mom was respected at the hospital, and that respect extended to Vivian. When I went to the nurse's office once with actual flu symptoms, fever and all, she took my temperature, gave me some water, and sent me back to class. "You Ridge girls are tough," she said. I wanted to scream that I was sick too, but I just nodded and left. Our younger brother Caleb was 9 years younger than us, born when we were 9. He was quiet, observant, lived in his own world of computers and code. He watched our family dynamics with the detachment of someone who knew better than to get involved. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at Vivian with this expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, not pity, just awareness. He saw what was happening. He just didn't have the words for it yet. When we turned 18, I got a part-time job at a coffee shop to save money for nursing school. Vivian got a volunteer position at the hospital where Mom worked. No application needed. Mom arranged it. Vivian became the sweet girl with the undiagnosed chronic condition who still showed up to help others. Patients loved her. Nurses loved her. She became the hospital's mascot, the brave young woman who suffered beautifully. I worked 40-hour weeks, took night classes, and barely slept. When I finally got accepted to the nursing program at 22, Mom's response was, "That's wonderful, honey," and then immediately turned back to Vivian, who was having a bad day and needed her full attention. But the real theft started when I was 23. I had been dating someone, Marcus, a medical student I met during my clinical rotations. He was kind, thoughtful, saw me as a whole person. For the first time since Dad died, I felt seen. We'd been together for 6 months when he met Vivian at a family dinner. She was having one of her good days, bright, charming, laughing at all his jokes. She asked about his studies, listened intently, touched his arm when she spoke. I watched it happen in real time, the shift in his attention, the way he started comparing us. "Vivian is so positive despite everything she deals with," he said on the drive home. "You could learn from her outlook." Within 2 months, he broke up with me. 3 months after that, I saw him having coffee with Vivian. She waved at me with that sweet smile, the one that said she hadn't done anything wrong. And technically, she hadn't. She'd just been herself. The problem was that being herself meant absorbing whatever light was near her. When I confronted her about it, she cried. Actual tears. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Ellie. He just understands what I'm going through. You've always been so strong. You don't need someone the way I do." And there it was, the logic that ruled our lives. She needed. I didn't. She deserved care. I deserved to manage. My best friend Sarah finally said what I'd been afraid to think. We were having coffee after my shift, and I was telling her about Vivian's latest health scare, some dizziness that required extensive testing that found nothing. Sarah put down her cup and looked at me hard. "Eleanor, your family treats you like you're disposable. and you let them. I wanted to defend them, to explain that it was complicated, that they loved me, just differently. But the words stuck in my throat because deep down, I knew she was right. That night, I tried to talk to Mom. I waited until Vivian was asleep and asked if we could talk. I told her I felt overlooked, that I needed her attention too, that being strong didn't mean I didn't hurt. She listened with that patient expression I'd seen 1,000 times, and then she said, "Eleanor, I know you feel that way, but you have to understand, Vivian needs more. She's fragile. You've always been able to handle things on your own. That's your strength." Gaslighting dressed up as a compliment. I was being praised for not needing the love I deserved. I stopped trying after that. I focused on my work, my studies, my own path. I thought if I just kept my head down and succeeded on my own terms, eventually they'd see me. Eventually I'd be enough. I didn't know that Vivian's performance was about to reach its final act, and that I would be cast as her most convincing patient. I was 25 when I started as a nursing trainee at the same hospital where Mom worked and where Vivian volunteered. I was proud. I'd worked so hard to get there. 5 years of school, countless clinical hours, passing my boards on the first try. This was my moment, my achievement, mine. The first week, I kept hearing the same thing. "Oh, you're Vivian's sister. She's such a sweetheart, so brave with everything she's dealing with." I'd smile and nod, always smiling, always nodding. As part of my onboarding, I had to complete a full health screening, standard procedure for all hospital employees, blood work, physical exam, updated vaccinations. I went through the motions, feeling fine, healthy, normal. I'd never been sick a day in my adult life beyond the occasional cold. 7 days later, I got a call from the employee health office. The nurse on the phone sounded concerned. "Eleanor, we need you to come in immediately. Your lab results show severe anemia and some other concerning markers. We need to run more tests." My heart dropped. Severe anemia? I felt fine. I worked 12-hour shifts without problems. I ran 3 miles every morning. How could I have severe anemia? The next week was a nightmare. More blood draws, more tests, a nutritionist consultation, a meeting with occupational health, everyone looking at me with concern, pity. My supervisor pulled me aside and said my clinical hours would be reduced until we got my health under control. "For my own safety," she said. Mom was beside herself with worry. "I can't believe we didn't see the signs," she kept saying. Vivian was immediately by my side, playing the devoted sister. She came to my appointments, held my hand, asked the doctors questions in that sweet, concerned voice. She posted about it on social media. Prayers for my sister who's been silently suffering. So many likes, so much attention. But something felt wrong. The symptoms they kept describing, I didn't have them. The fatigue, the dizziness, the weakness. I felt normal. When I told the doctors this, they looked at my charts and said sometimes anemia presents asymptomatically. "The numbers don't lie," they said, "except numbers can lie when someone else writes them." It was Owen Patel, a new nurse who'd just transferred from Chicago, who first noticed something odd. He was reviewing my case file during a shift meeting, and he frowned. "These lab values don't match the follow-up results," he said quietly to me one day. "The dates are right, but the progression doesn't make medical sense." I asked him what he meant. He showed me. My supposed initial results showed severe deficiency, but then a test done 3 days later, before any treatment, showed improvement. Then the next test showed decline again. The pattern was erratic, impossible. "Lab values don't bounce around like this," he said. "Not without intervention or a serious underlying condition we'd have caught by now." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What are you saying?" He looked uncomfortable. "I'm saying someone might have access to your records who shouldn't, or someone made errors in data entry. Either way, this needs to be investigated." I requested copies of all my medical records, all of them. When I spread them out on my apartment floor that night, I saw it. Different handwriting on some of the forms, notations that didn't match the official lab reports. And then I found it. A requisition form for tests I never authorized, signed with a version of my signature that wasn't quite right. Too loopy, too curved. It looked like Vivian's handwriting. My hands started shaking. My vision blurred. I felt like I was falling even though I was sitting on the floor. She wouldn't. She couldn't. This was insane. This was criminal. This was impossible. But it wasn't impossible. She'd volunteered at the hospital for years. She knew the system. She had access to files, to forms, to the medical records room that was always understaffed and poorly monitored. She knew Mom's credentials, her passwords, her security codes, and she knew that nobody would question Vivian Ridge, the sweet, sick girl who just wanted to help. I confronted her. I drove to her apartment at midnight, shaking with rage and betrayal and something close to grief. When she opened the door, she smiled. "Ellie, what a surprise. Are you okay? You look upset." I shoved the papers at her. "Did you do this? Did you alter my medical records?" Her face went pale, then confused, then hurt. "What? Eleanor, what are you talking about? Why would I do that?" "Because being sick is your identity," I said, my voice breaking. "And you can't stand the idea of me being healthy when you've built your entire life on being fragile?" She started crying. Not the theatrical crying she did for audiences. Real tears. Messy, raw, scared. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed Mom to see me. To really see me. But she was so proud of you, starting at the hospital, doing so well. I just wanted her attention back. So she made me sick. She made me the patient. She made me the one who needed saving. And in doing so, she got to be the saint who cared for me, the perfect daughter who sacrificed for her struggling sister." I felt something break inside me that night. Not my heart. My hope. The hope that my family would ever see me for who I was. I left her apartment without another word, and I made a decision. I was done begging for love from people who chose not to give it. I was done being erased. I was done being the disposable twin. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of my transformation. The end of who I'd been, and the start of who I was meant to become. I didn't tell Mom what Vivian had done. Not yet. I needed proof beyond handwriting and suspicions. I needed time to think. To plan. To rebuild myself without an audience. So I did something I'd never done before. I pulled back. I stopped answering Mom's calls immediately. I declined family dinners. When Vivian texted asking to talk, I responded with short, polite messages. "I'm busy. I'm fine. I'll reach out when I can." The hospital investigation took 3 months. Owen had filed an official report about the irregularities in my records. Once the compliance department got involved, they found everything: forged signatures, altered lab reports, unauthorized access to medical databases using stolen credentials. Every trail led back to Vivian. During those 3 months, I focused on something I'd never prioritized before: myself. I started therapy with Dr. Lisa Chen, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma. The first session, she asked me to describe my relationship with my sister. I talked for 45 minutes straight. When I finished, she said something that changed everything. "Eleanor, you've spent your entire life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. That's not a failure on your part. That's theft on theirs." Theft. She was right. They'd stolen my childhood, my confidence, my sense of worth, and I'd let them because I didn't know I had a choice. I threw myself into work. I requested a transfer to the pediatric oncology unit, far from where Mom worked. I wanted to care for kids who were actually sick, who actually needed help. Kids who reminded me why I'd become a nurse in the first place. Not for recognition, not for love. Because caring for people was who I was at my core, with or without an audience. I excelled. The head of the unit, Dr. Patricia Morrison, noticed. She pulled me aside one day and said, "Eleanor, I've worked with a lot of nurses. You have something special. You see patients, not cases. You should consider specializing in behavioral health integration. We need people who understand that medical conditions don't exist in a vacuum." She had no idea how much I understood that. I enrolled in a certification program for psychiatric nursing. I learned about Munchausen syndrome, factitious disorder, the psychology of attention seeking through illness. I learned that what Vivian did to me was the extreme end of something many people do in smaller ways. The need to be cared for can become an addiction when it's the only way you've learned to receive love. I also learned that I'd enabled it by being the strong one, by never asking for help, by making it easy for them to forget about me. 6 months after confronting Vivian, I moved into my own apartment, not a place near family, not somewhere convenient, a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew the Ridge name. I painted the walls, not beige, not neutral, a warm amber that reminded me of sunrise. I hung art that I loved. I bought plants. I created a space that was entirely mine. My brother Caleb was the only family member I stayed in contact with. He'd just turned 16, still living at home, still watching everything with those quiet, observant eyes. He came over one Saturday to help me assemble furniture, and as we worked, he said, "I always knew something was wrong, the way Mom treats you both. It's not fair." "You saw it?" "Everyone saw it," he said. "We just didn't say anything because that's what our family does. We pretend everything is fine." He was right. Silence had been our family's religion. The hospital finished their investigation 8 months after it started. Vivian was barred from volunteering at any healthcare facility. She was required to attend mandatory psychological counseling, and the hospital offered me something I'd never expected: a promotion. They wanted me to help develop a new program identifying and preventing medical fraud and factitious disorders. They wanted someone who understood the psychology behind it, someone who'd lived it. I accepted. For the first time in my life, my pain had purpose. My experience had value. I wasn't just the other twin anymore. I was Eleanor Ridge, RN, specialist in behavioral health integration and medical ethics. A year after that terrible night in Vivian's apartment, I'd transformed everything: new job, new home, new understanding of myself. I'd built a life where my worth wasn't dependent on being seen by people who'd chosen to look away. But I still hadn't confronted Mom. I still hadn't forced my family to sit with the truth of what they'd done. That reckoning was coming, and it would happen on my terms, not theirs. Because the girl who'd spent her whole life being strong for others had finally learned to be strong for herself, and that changed everything. The confrontation happened at our grandmother Nancy's 80th birthday. I'd avoided family gatherings for over a year, but Grandma Nancy had always been kind to me in her quiet way. Before her memory started fading, she was one of the few people who seemed to see both of us clearly. I couldn't miss her birthday. I arrived late on purpose. The party was at Mom's house, the same house where I'd grown up feeling invisible. When I walked in, the room went quiet. I looked different. I'd cut my hair shorter, a style distinctly mine, not the long waves Vivian and I had always shared. I wore clothes that fit my personality, not the safe neutral tones I'd hidden in for years. I stood differently, taller, surer. Mom recovered first, rushing over to hug me. "Eleanor, we've missed you so much. Where have you been?" "Building a life," I said simply. Vivian was across the room, thinner than I remembered, shadows under her eyes. She'd been in therapy for a year. I'd heard through Caleb that she was actually dealing with her issues, not performing them. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Not manipulation, not sweetness. Shame. The party went on around us. Cake, presents, laughter. I stayed near Grandma Nancy, holding her hand, listening to her stories that looped and repeated. In her confusion, she kept calling me Vivian and calling Vivian Eleanor. It was oddly fitting. She couldn't tell us apart because she'd never been taught there was a hierarchy. After dinner, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Eleanor, we need to talk about what happened, about the hospital situation. You mean about Vivian falsifying my medical records? About her committing fraud and nearly destroying my career?" Mom flinched. "She was sick, Eleanor. She needed help. Therapy has helped her understand." "What about me?" I cut her off. My voice was calm. I'd practiced this. "What about what I needed? When did you ever stop to consider that maybe I was struggling too? You've always been fine. You're strong." "Being strong doesn't mean I don't feel pain, Mom. It just means I learned early that showing it wouldn't get me anywhere." She looked genuinely confused. "I don't understand. We've always loved you." And there it was. They did love me, in their way. The problem was their way left me hollow. You loved the version of me that didn't need anything. The version that could be ignored without consequence. I pulled out a folder from my bag. Inside were copies of everything: the forged documents, the investigation report, the evidence of years of systematic favoritism. I've spent the last year working with the hospital to develop training on identifying factitious disorder and medical fraud. I've turned our family dysfunction into my life's work, because if I can help one person recognize when they're being erased, if I can help one family see what they're doing to their forgotten child, then maybe my pain means something. Mom's face crumpled. Eleanor, I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel invisible, disposable, like I only mattered when I was useful. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I know you didn't mean it, but you did it anyway. And Vivian did something criminal because she'd learned that being sick was the only way to be loved in this family. Vivian walked in then. She'd been listening. Eleanor, I'm sorry. I've said it before, but I need you to really hear it. I'm sorry. I was so desperate to be seen that I made you invisible, and that was unforgivable. For the first time, I saw actual remorse, not performance, not manipulation, real guilt, real recognition of what she'd done. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. I'm not the same person who let herself be erased. I've built boundaries. I've built a life where I'm not defined by being your twin or mom's other daughter, or the one who doesn't need anything. Mom was crying now. What does that mean for us? It means I'm not available to be your afterthought anymore. It means if you want a relationship with me, you need to actively choose it. Not just default to it. Not just assume I'll always be there because I always have been. I stayed for cake. I hugged Grandma Nancy goodbye. I left on my own terms. 3 years have passed since that birthday party. I'm 31 now. I run the Behavioral Health Integration Program at the hospital, working with patients whose illnesses blur the line between physical and psychological. I help families recognize when attention-seeking becomes pathological. I help patients who've learned that being sick is the only way to be cared for. Mom and I talk once a month, sometimes twice. She's trying, really trying. She asks about my work, my life, my thoughts. She's learning to see me. It's slow, it's awkward, but it's real. Vivian is in a different place now, too. She's in school, studying social work, trying to help people the right way. We're not close, we may never be, but we're honest. And sometimes honesty is better than closeness that's built on lies. Caleb texts me regularly. He's in college now, studying computer science, and he tells me I inspired him. That watching me choose myself showed him he could too. The note that started it all, the one the nurse found in Vivian's shoe, is framed in my office. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that truth always surfaces, that documentation matters, that the smallest piece of evidence can unravel the biggest lie. But more than that, it reminds me that I survived being erased. I survived being the other twin, the forgotten daughter, the disposable one. And I didn't just survive. I became someone who helps others survive too. I don't need to be chosen anymore. I don't need to be the favorite. I don't need to compete for love that should be free. Because I finally learned the truth my father tried to teach me all those years ago. I'm not half of anything. I never was. I was always whole. And now, finally, I'm free. This story, while dramatized, is inspired by the real experiences of countless individuals who have lived in the shadow of a sibling, constantly compared and chronically overlooked. Being genetically identical yet emotionally discarded teaches you something profound. Your worth was never determined by who saw you, but by who you chose to become when no one was looking. These aren't just stories. They are lessons in self-worth, resilience, and the courage to choose yourself when no one else does. Before you go, I want to ask you, have you ever been the strong one in your family? The one expected to manage while someone else got all the care? Have you ever felt invisible in your own home, no matter what you achieved? And for those who felt like they had to prove their worth just to be noticed, what was the moment you decided to finally choose yourself? If this story resonated with you, if you felt the pain, the struggle, and ultimately the liberation. Write the word whole in the comments so I know you stayed until the end. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'd love to know where this message is reaching. If you found value in this story, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change how you see yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's still fighting to be seen. And don't forget to click on the next video in the cards above, because every story here carries a message worth hearing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you were never half of anyone. You were always whole.